Hello and welcome to DTV, your source for discussion and information on politics and the Democratic Party in Knoxville. I'm Michael Davis, and I'll be your host for DTV's closer look at the candidates running in Knoxville's City Council election happening on November the 7th. DTV would like to remind you that on October 18th, early voting begins and it runs through November the 2nd. For more information on early voting and to find out more about its locations, you can go to www.knoxcounty.org/election. We have with us today for this segment District 4 candidates Lauren Ryder, Harry Tindell, and Amelia Parker. Lauren, Harry, Amelia, thank you so much for coming to DTV today, and welcome.
Thanks for having us.
So I guess your lives are pretty exciting right now. Got a lot going on.
Staying busy, yes.
I'll bet. So we'll jump right into questions here. District 4 would most commonly be referred to as the eastern part of North Knoxville. We have several issues to get to, but very briefly, please tell our viewers about your district and why you want to represent it. And Lauren, we'll start with you.
Okay. Well, I've been really active in the district for the last 12 years, working with neighborhoods and businesses throughout mostly North Knoxville. There's been a lot of challenges. There are a lot of folks trying to move into the area. We've had a lot of business development. We also have a lot of, and have seen redevelopment in old factories, brownfields, houses that were once abandoned as people moved to the suburbs. And so we're seeing the challenges of folks moving back in because it's a walkable community and near downtown. And there are the amenities coming up. And so we're trying to figure out how to balance that. We also have a large amount of the homeless population really close to our district, not technically in it. It depends. There's a variety of services spread around. And I've also been involved and gone to a lot of meetings about that over the years. So those are a couple of different issues that interest me.
Thank you. Harry?
Well, Michael, I grew up in the area of the 4th District. I like to say I've lived on either side of Broadway my whole life. I graduated from Fulton High School, then went on to the University of Tennessee, where I graduated from the College of Business. Having been from the district for so long and having represented it in other elected offices, I've seen it from a lot of different perspectives, but almost anywhere I go in the district, I see things that I consider opportunities. I think the Broadway Central corridors, they're certainly starting to develop as downtown grows north. There's some challenges there that I think we can get out of the way to make that growth more logical and more community friendly. You look at the Sharps Ridge Memorial Park, which adjoins the 4th District. I mean, I think there's an opportunity there. There's some traffic issues there on Broadway without a turn lane. You go around and look at the traffic in Fountain City, quite an opportunity there to get people through the district more efficiently so that we can make that corridor work for the population. You go over to near where I live, off Washington Pike in Millertown, and you look at the Easttown Mall area, and goodness gracious, the mall is really decaying in terms of retail, and we've got to figure out how to repurpose that very important project. You know, it's good not only for the tax base, but it's also a job engine, and we need to make that work for the community and for the city. And then lastly, I believe that the Magnolia Corridor, that's on the southern end of the 4th District, really, and I don't see any greater opportunity in Knoxville than what we could do to make that corridor vibrant and a great place to live and to work.
Okay. Amelia?
Thank you so much, and thanks for having us here. I grew up in Knoxville and currently live in North Knoxville, where I'm a homeowner close to the Knoxville Center Mall, Easttown Mall area. And 4th District has changed a lot over the last, several years since I was a little kid in Knoxville. And I want to be a part, one of the reasons I'm running for City Council is to be a part of progress that we're seeing in the city and make sure it makes it to areas that need it the most. That part of the 4th District is definitely one of those areas. Also through door knocking, I've talked to many residents in the neighborhood. I've noticed some changes. We have neighborhoods where residents are living on large lots and are getting to retirement age and are looking for ways to downsize, looking for ways to reduce their expenses, but not necessarily wanting to leave the 4th District. So there's a lot of interest, whether it's around the Holston Hills area or Fountain City area, that there are retirement living communities that are available for folks so that they don't have to leave their community as they're aging out of these homes that require such maintenance. And then, of course, near the downtown, we have a booming part of the 4th District that has there's a lot of interest and a lot of new folks coming in, and a lot of folks who've been there for quite some time. I serve on the board of the Birdhouse Community Center in the 4th and Guild neighborhood, and this has been a wonderful space that's been there for quite some time and has kind of reemerged in the last 10 years to help kind of facilitate some of the social justice issues that folks want to see attention applied to in Knoxville.
Thank you. So you've all mentioned that Knoxville is changing and growing at a fast rate right now, especially in the neighborhoods surrounding downtown, like North Knoxville, also East Knoxville and the South Waterfront. What do you see as the biggest benefits? What are the biggest benefits and risks of these changes? And how can the city plan for a balance between the two? And Amelia, we'll start with you on this one.
Sure. I'll start with some of the risks because one of the main parts of the platform that I'm running on is to ensure, as we see a lot of redevelopment and money invested in Knoxville, that we have a people-centered development moving forward. And so some of the risks that I'm concerned about is that we will have too much of an emphasis on buildings and things like neighborhood character without having an emphasis on the well-being of people who live there. And the result of that can be that people get priced out of neighborhoods, that neighborhoods will have a different kind of priority or purpose in terms of city policy, but not in terms of what those residents need in that neighborhood. I think there's great opportunity because there's such love for Knoxville, not only from new folks who are moving in, but for folks like myself who grew up here. And even when we leave for a few years, we find our way to come back and have a great commitment. And so I believe if we invest in our residents and imagine them being the change that we want to see in Knoxville, that we can grasp onto some of these opportunities as we grow as a city in a way that doesn't leave anyone behind.
Mm. And what would you say about to a voter that would say that the increased tax revenues that we would get from more and more business coming into these areas would actually be a benefit for everybody in ways that people that hadn't seen that before could gain access to some of that revenue?
Well, one thing I would say is that, especially on DTV, I would say be wary of any sort of trickle-down economics plan because we've seen, not just in Knoxville, but throughout our country over the last couple of decades, that is not a plan that tends to work. And so as we're waiting for these benefits to kind of trickle down, we still have folks who are suffering. We still have folks who are without housing that's needed. And so that's why there's a definite need to combine looking at where we want to provide incentives to bring businesses in, but at the same time having our own plan of support and providing those services currently and not waiting for a couple of decades down the road.
Okay, thank you. Harry?
The opportunity to me is growing the city, and I don't see doing it in a trickle-down way for sure. That's usually associated with tax cuts to higher income brackets. What the city needs to do, and that's what cities are for. They're supposed to grow. We should grow smartly and we should grow sustainably. But we need to grow, and as we grow, what we'll do is we'll not only bring amenities into the community that people can enjoy, but we'll bring jobs, and we'll also keep the revenue coming in for the city to operate on so that we don't have to raise taxes, but we can still pay for all of those services that we need and want so much. The key to growth is not just commercial, though. It's not just something like a new restaurant on Broadway or a East Town Mall. It's also residential. The biggest part of our property tax base is residential, not commercial, and it's growing slow. And to the extent that we can offer housing opportunities, affordable certainly, and others, and grow the economy, then we'll take the pressure off of some of our expense items, and we'll be able to continue the services we need while offering the growth that will get us there.
Okay. So in defining sustainable, I think some valid arguments that some voters have expressed before would be about, well, who defines sustainable? Is that coming from a development standpoint, or is it coming from the community neighborhoods? Can you elaborate a little bit on what your idea of that sustainable growth would be?
Sure. Sustainable to me is a mathematic term, but the City Council would determine what that is collectively. The goal would be not to have a spike of something that happens and gives you money or revenue in 1 year and puts strains on the resources and the infrastructure, closes roads and such. The goal would be to do something that works on a period of time so that it grows at a reasonable exponential growth. Something near inflation certainly may be better than that.
Okay. Lauren.
Yeah. So basically, what we need to look at, and I honestly forgot what your question was.
Sure, it was a while ago at this point, so that's fine. Knoxville's changing, growing a lot right now.
Yeah.
So what do you see are the biggest benefits and risks to these changes, and how can the city plan for balance between the two?
Well, so basically your city council makes your decisions, but they make a lot of decisions based on public input. And so one of the things that we have to do is we see this growth coming our way. We had kind of a stagnant period after the Great Recession, and we've seen kind of a resurgence of development around downtown and the near areas because the economy is picking up and gaining speed. And we've seen an exceptional, better than some other areas in the country happening in our pockets here around downtown. So as we move forward with all this pressure of growth, we need to get the input of the neighborhoods and the businesses. They both play a role. They both interlock and work together to make progress happen. But as we've seen that growth, we've seen some income raised in both sales tax and property tax. We all know there's been an exceptional amount of progress downtown, which has created a stable core that we can gain from and build off of. And so a couple of things that have happened. The increased sales tax has allowed a low-income fund that we can work from and help address some of the housing shortage that we're having. Right now, if you want to move into some of our neighborhoods in the 4th District, it's really hard. It's word of mouth to get a place to live. And that's for folks that can afford to do that. We have other people with vouchers. We lost over 800 units of KCDC housing that took vouchers, and so we've not made up for that, and we're waiting to build stuff, and we provided a fund to help subsidize that. So that's kind of the balance of the progress is happening, and that's how we gain off of it. We've got new revenues that we can do these things with to help us balance out the amount of housing. At the same time, you attract businesses because it's a popular place to be, and so you build in jobs and you attract economic growth. But you've got to balance it, and you need to get the input of the communities because people have been here for a long time and they want to retain what we've had but also gain new. And so as we move forward, start working on the new zoning code and everything, we're going to create these opportunities for new housing. But we have to make sure we incentivize it and look at these pots of money that have come from the progress to be able to make sure it's a balanced progress.
Okay. All right, so you mentioned the public input on that. What sort of practical and reliable method would you suggest for getting that public input?
Well, the challenge is getting people to come to meetings because, usually they're in the evening, sometimes they're at 5 o'clock. Folks don't get off work till 5:30. They can't get there. We've done surveys. I've responded to surveys that the city has put out, and then, you go and you tell all your neighbors to respond to it. They don't respond. We've had in the past ordinances that have gotten passed by council, and you go to multiple meetings, both your neighborhood meetings and city meetings and neighborhood newsletters, email, electronic newsletters, and try and get feedback from people, and they don't respond. So the part of it is people don't necessarily feel the impact of something until after it's passed. I think that's the best way you can do. You can spend money and pay for marketing to get it promoted out there, but word of mouth and getting it out through your neighborhood filters and the grassroots of getting it out into the communities is the best that we can do, and scheduling different varieties of time for people to come and be able to input both in person and through electronic media are the best ways that I know to get it out.
Okay. All right. Moving on to elections and representation within Knoxville. It's a city made up of distinct neighborhoods, especially in the 4th District, with quite varied backgrounds within those neighborhoods. These neighborhoods, of course, make up the city council districts where each of you just staged your primary campaigns. But in Knoxville, our city council general elections allow citywide voting after the district-only primaries. In your views, how does this manner of election affect representation in the city? And Harry, we'll start with you on this one.
You know, all of us have campaigned across the city at this point, and not just in our district, and we've talked to a lot of voters, and my experience is that voters like the way we elect our council. It is confusing sometimes to get to know those new candidates right after the primary that weren't in your district, but each neighborhood, as you said, it's a collection of very diverse and strong neighborhood groups in Knoxville. That's how I define it, and those neighborhoods like to have all 9 council members accountable to them through the electoral process, and so to give that up would make it simpler, and it would make it more defined, perhaps like the county form of government. But I don't believe the city voters want that, and so I think that what we have works. The risk to it is that, you know, in some jurisdictions, you know, this form of election has been challenged, and it is persevered here in Knoxville, but it may not be something that we always have, but I support it as is.
Okay. Amelia.
I definitely think it needs to change. There was a similar system of elections in Chattanooga in the 1980s. There, essentially all members of the city council were elected citywide. It's similar to ours, except that we have the primary process in district. But they challenged their electoral system, and it was found to be unconstitutional and violating Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act. And the reason is because their system was put into place similar to when Knoxville's was put into place to guarantee some level of representation on city council, specifically from the African American community coming out of following the 1964 Civil Rights Act. And that's one reason why the court found it to be unconstitutional. So I hope that, we are able to, it would be nice for us to be able to come together as a community and make those changes without it needing to go to court. But I do think that it should be challenged so that districts are able to select their own representatives. It makes it much more difficult for those who do not have a lot of money, who do not have flexibility within their jobs to campaign citywide, like other candidates are able to do. So it keeps a lot of people out of the process who otherwise should be.
Yeah. Lauren.
Well, I won the primary in our district, so of course it would be easier if we were just running within the district. I can say that. Because I've worked so much in our district, I had a lot of support there, and so the big challenge now is getting your name out across the city. And when you go talk to the voters out there, their immediate reaction to you is, you're in the wrong place, I can't vote for you. So they're very confused about it because your state representatives, your county representatives don't work that way. And they don't remember that they did vote this way before. It just doesn't, because it's been 4 years since they voted that way, so they just forget. So it causes a lot of confusion because it's not like any of the other elections that they're voting on. On the other hand, you do hear, and I don't want to make decisions based on anecdotal evidence. I honestly had been voting this way since I've been here and not question it. But now, looking at things and the way they've happened in this election, it's a valid question. You hear about instances where people go to county commission, which operates differently, where those people run in their district 2 times. And a lot of the decisions they make, as well as what city council makes, are land use decisions. And so when you go as a neighborhood or an individual to argue your case about a zoning issue, you're up there in the instance with county commission. You've got 11 people that have the power to make a decision for you, and only 4 of them did you get to vote for, and will you ever be able to vote for? Your at-larges and your 1 district person. And so the anecdotal stories that I'm hearing are that when you make your case at county commission, you get little to no buy-in because you have no sway over some of those folks sitting up there because you can't vote for them. And they say that that's what's different about city council. So I'm not jumping to make one change versus another, but I certainly think it's worth investigating and looking at.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on to some policing, safety, and community health issues. It's no secret that opioid addiction and abuse is a major problem across the country, and Knoxville is seeing its share of those related problems as well. Is Knoxville doing enough, and is it doing it right? What innovations might you suggest in dealing with this problem? And Lauren, we'll start with you on this one.
Well, I'm married to a physician who deals with folks who are asking for these prescriptions on a regular basis, and I live in a part of the city where we see we all do, really. It's pervasive at this point. So, you know, the challenge is that the manufacturers of the drug companies and the FDA, they tried to produce something that wasn't going to be addictive, and they missed the mark entirely. And now the burden is upon us locally. We're spending money hand over fist on Narcan, and we are overtaxing both our police, our paramedics, and our fire protection with dealing with this on a continual and ongoing basis. And the only way to address it, other than, you know, we dry up the legal supply of the pills, which in some cases are illegal, then we're going to have heroin step in behind it. So you can't dry up the supply. Then how do you keep paying for the Narcan? How do you pay for the staff that's out there administering it? The real issue at hand, the root cause behind it all, to end the problem, is how do you get rehab? And this isn't a 30-day rehab for these addictions. This is like an 18-month rehab. We don't have programs here. We have people that have to travel very far if they can pay for it, because there's no means to pay for it. And, you know, we are beyond the ability locally to pay for that. The problem is a national problem. At this point, we have to keep supplying the Narcan. We have to keep providing the first responders to take care of it, but we've got to look to our state and federal legislators and the Human Health and Services and the drug companies. They need to be held accountable for this. Okay. So,
Harry, your thoughts?
Well, I think it's been well explained. You know, we have a serious problem here. Knoxville is near the top of the cities that dealing with these addiction issues. To me, that if we're going to ask our police officers to help us solve this problem, we've got to make sure that our staffing of our police department is adequate. We're in a situation where, you know, there's some argument as to, you know, what full staffing is, what deployment levels we have on the street. If you talk to the officers on the street, they'll tell you that they're working a lot of overtime and that we're not always having maximum enforcement capability on the streets. And some non-emergency response times, I think, are suffering certainly as a result of that. We need to figure out a comprehensive study to figure out what level we should staff our police department, why we're losing the ones that we're training now. That's a very expensive problem to have when we train the police officers and then they go to work for another agency. And then the other situation is, of course, the pay and benefits are part of that retention, and we need to look at it comprehensively so that we have the manpower on the street to solve this very, very serious problem. I would add one other thing, Michael, is that you know, I'm very proud. You know, there's sort of three big endorsements that everybody tries to get in these elections, and you know, I was very proud to get the support of our police officers through the Fraternal Order of Police endorsement, also our first responders and firefighters through the Knoxville Firefighters Association. I'm very proud to have that endorsement as well. And then the third that we just heard about just a couple of days ago was the Knoxville Area Association of Realtors. And so I'm very proud to have each of those endorsements.
Okay, thank you. Amelia.
As the others were saying, this is an issue that's impacting all of us, and I certainly know families who've been directly impacted by this. I'm happy to see that for the most part as a community, we are attempting to pursue this issue in terms of a public health issue rather than a public safety issue, and I want to encourage us to continue down that road. But in order to do that, that's where we need to invest our money, is into our public health professionals who can be a resource and who can respond. You know, and it does worry me. I've brought this up on other topics as well. But when we talk about our police being overtaxed, I think that it is our responsibility, certainly on City Council, to find ways to respond to public health crises that do not require police assistance. And I believe that we have the capacity to do that. We recently saw the city invest in social workers who could work with our homeless population. So I'm happy to see the city heading in that direction, and I would want to see more of that. I think the others covered the background pretty well, so there's no need for me to repeat that. It's definitely a national issue that requires national, state, and local attention, and it'll be a challenge for us to figure out what additional things can be done on a local level to respond as needed.
Okay, thank you. Well, we're coming toward the end of our segment, but we have just a little bit of time left for one more question. In There's been a controversy recently over the Knox County School Board's recent suggested change to its teacher and student harassment policies by dropping the words sexual orientation and actual or perceived gender and replacing them with the word sex. Obviously, this is a county issue, but because all schools in Knoxville are run by the county. But city residents are all concerned because city residents attend public schools, which are all run by the county and would be affected by these policies. Our own mayor, Madeline Harrow, has weighed in on the issue. How do you view the city council and its members' role in this? Is this something that city council has any influence on or should be making comment on? And let's see, Harry, we'll start with you on this one.
Well, the city doesn't have a direct role. Of course, the school board is independent. I think that if we have an inclusive and diversity recognizing policy, we should keep it and not roll it back. That would be my short answer. In terms of what the city can do for the schools, clearly, the city is the economic engine for the region, and a good part of the sales tax raised and all of the property taxes matched in the county. So the schools thrive with the success of the city, and so we affect them economically, but not so much policy-wise. We certainly can talk to the members of the school board since we know them as members of the community, and I know a good number of them.
Okay. And Amelia.
Well, I was happy to see the mayor come out with this statement, and that's what I would expect from any elected official in Knoxville, even though we do not have any sort of authority over the school board, because the issue at hand in this situation, and what I liked hearing the mayor respond to, was the legal advice that was coming to the school board. And in terms of just purely what each entity is able to do within the law, I think that as policymakers we can all speak up in those situations and help provide some clarity for those that we represent in the community. And then, just like Harry said, in our own individual capacity, we can reach out to school board members. And because often people will respond to people differently based on relationship, based on a title that you hold, whatever it might be. And I think that we should take it upon ourselves to do all that we can within the law to stand up. My background is in human rights, so to stand up for human rights in our community.
Okay.
Basically, I work with students at Pellissippi, and when this first came out, there were a lot of people that were really upset and alarmed by it, as well as I was kind of shocked that it was even being discussed. So I'm happy to see that it's kind of turning in a different direction, and I hope we're going to go in the right path. But I do think as elected officials, maybe not as a body, you definitely stand as an opportunity to be a role model and stand up like Rahara did and say this is the right direction for this to go.
Okay. All right. Well, that brings us to the end of our segment today. Thank you so much to our candidates, Lauren Ryder, Harry Tindell, and Amelia Parker. We really appreciate you coming down today and spending some time with us and hearing your thoughts on some pressing issues going on in Knoxville. Thank you for watching, viewers, and thank you again to all of our candidates. Don't forget that early voting starts on October the 18th and runs through November the 2nd, and Election Day is on November the 7th. We'll see you at the polls. I'm Michael Davis, and thank you for watching DTV.